Hi, everybody. Welcome to Resistance Live. It is Tuesday, the 27th of May, 2025. We have some breaking news this morning out of the Pentagon. Very, very strange story that I don't know, is marked by the usual Trump administration chaos, I guess is the best way to put it. Pete Hegseth is embroiled in yet another scandal. And the details of this one are, I don't even know how to put it, hard to track because there's so many competing narratives about what actually went down here. So we're going to talk about that. We have to talk about these southbound ICE flights over the weekend. We've got to talk about things like the midterm races and the COVID vaccine. And we have a whole bunch of stuff on deck for today. So thanks for being here. First things first, I'm Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin, lawyer, political analyst, activist, commentator, all sorts of other things. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, I'm wearing a black cable knit sweater. My hair is pulled back. I'm a pink skin, green-eyed, dirty, blonde-haired woman, and I am in front of my bookshelf and my yellow utility cart and my Chucks. And I'm coming to you, as always, from occupied Muncie, Lenape, and Mohegan land. So here's the deal with this Pete Hegseth story, because I just don't know how this man is still the Secretary of Defense. And I have real questions about whether or not he will be after this particular set of allegations. But here's the deal. You all will remember that a number of weeks back, there was this scandal in his leadership of the Pentagon. And in the space of about 3 days, he lost a whole group of aides, including 3 senior aides that had come on board with him. And this was rumored to be about the leak of the signal chat concerning the bombing of Yemen that in any other circumstance would have brought down any other Secretary of Defense, but somehow he's still here. Well, lo and behold, this morning, The Guardian broke a story that apparently the way in which these aides were sussed out was through an illegal NSA wiretap. So let me just be clear about this. The National Security Administration, or fundamentally any other agency inside our United States government who's in the realm of law enforcement, is not allowed to tap the phones of U.S. citizens without a warrant. The only circumstances in which they are allowed to do that, without significant court intervention, is through what's called the FISA court. So even there has to be approval of a warrant and that is ordinarily done in instances of terrorism. The National Security Administration, the NSA, tapping the phones of members of the Pentagon without a warrant is per se illegal. You are not allowed to do that under the Constitution of the United States. And the story that is coming out of The Guardian is that the way in which the leak of the NSA wiretap came to pass was through Pete Hegseth's personal lawyer, who now is claiming that he never said there was an illegal NSA wiretap. Because, of course, if he knew about an illegal NSA wiretap and was a part of any of that, he's committed a crime. This has now caused a huge scandal inside the Trump White House, where now, according to the reporting in The Guardian, the Trump White House doesn't know who to believe. Was there actually an illegal NSA wiretap? Who actually found out, who had leaked the story about the signal chat? And, as The Guardian points out, the issue of a illegal NSA wiretap would be a much, much larger scandal if conducted at the hands of the Secretary of Defense than even the signal chat about the bombing of Yemen. And that, by the way, as we all know, involved the illegal disclosure of classified information about highly classified and confidential military operations in a chat that included the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. And then subsequently, we found out there was another chat that involved Pete Hegseth's wife and, friends and his lawyer and all these other people who were not supposed to know anything about it either. So all of this is a burgeoning story that we've literally just learned about in the last hour. And the real question now, not that it matters because incompetence seems to reign supreme in the Trump administration, right? But the real question now is whether or not this is going to be the nail in the coffin of Pete Hegseth's career. Because if he has, in fact, engaged in illegal wiretapping of senior members of the Department of Defense, and that's true, which there's still a huge question mark about in light of his lawyer statements and other people's statements and how this information came to light, and whether or not this was actually, by the way, the other allegation contained in the Guardian article is that this may have all been carried out to fire people who didn't like Pete Hegseth's chief of staff. So the question is where this is going to land. And I don't think anybody knows that just yet, but I will say this, okay? The Department of Defense and every member in it, including the Secretary of Defense, takes an oath of office, as we all know, to uphold the Constitution of the United States. The Fourth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States prohibits illegal searches and seizures, including through wiretaps. So this, by the way, would qualify, if true, as a high crime and misdemeanor by anybody inside the Department of Defense or the NSA who participated in this. Reminder that, of course, you know, the head of the NSA is Tulsi Gabbard, who also was on that illegal signal chat concerning the bombing of Yemen. You know, this raises very serious concerns and questions about whether or not literally the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution has been broken. So stay tuned for this, but you all should be aware that this is a very nascent additional layer of scandal in the already shameful term of Pete Hegseth as the Secretary of Defense. I mean, like, unbelievable breaking news in the last hour. Okay. We have to talk a bit about what's going on inside Health and Human Services, because news broke this morning that now the recommendation to vaccinate children and pregnant women against COVID has been removed from the FDA recommendations. And I have to say that I find this one horrifying. We all know that RFK Jr. is deeply anti-vax, whatever he says now about measles. And, you know, the other thing that I will just say here is that, as we all know, the pandemic isn't over, right? I know that it's been, there's been so much gaslighting about this. And, you know, this, by the way, included the past administration because they wanted to get the economy back on track. Much to the harm of disabled and immune compromised people. And it's honestly shameful that this is where we are, that we're still having a conversation as if the pandemic has ended when in fact it hasn't. But why you would recommend particularly that, and they say healthy children and pregnant women do not have to be vaccinated. Why you would make that recommendation makes absolutely no sense to me. Because apart from anything else, essentially, if you are dealing with unvaccinated pregnant people and kids in the middle of winter, we all know that there have been huge surges of COVID around the holidays for the last few years running. I myself got it for the second time in January. You know, it just makes no sense to me. And frankly, I'm really very, very bothered by the idea that we're now not going to have recommendations to vaccinate kids for COVID in the same way that we vaccinate everybody for the flu. And I will also just say that when I was pregnant, personally, I wanted every vaccine that they could give to me because I wanted to have antibodies that I could pass on to my kids. So this is something, again, that is deeply disturbing. And I will also say that I know a number of people right now who are going for COVID boosters now, because there are serious concerns about whether or not any boosters are going to be available come the fall. We had some very bad news about COVID last week, which is that Moderna has now withdrawn its application for what was supposed to be a joint vaccine for COVID and the flu, which, by the way, the science shows made the vaccine more effective against both. That giving them in a combined fashion actually made vaccination against COVID and the flu more effective. And that has now been withdrawn because they know that under RFK Jr., there's no way that that vaccine is going to be approved, which is shameful because it means a lot more people are going to get sick and die. So one of the things that I want people to just be thoughtful about right now is, where are you on your vaccine schedule? I know for us personally, just like a lot of other people, we did our flu and COVID vaccines last fall. I waited a little bit longer to get mine, but I did my kids right before they went back to school. You might want to consider, again, don't take medical advice from me, but, you know, consulting with your doctor or your health practitioner about whether or not you should get vaccinated now. Okay. Because as I mentioned, by the way, like back when Trump won the election, we saw this coming for a long time. Right. And, you know, one of the things that I just want everybody to be very thoughtful about right now is your own medical care, your preventative care. That, by the way, should go for anybody who's covered by Medicare or Medicaid right now because of what's happening with the budget bill. Please make sure you are up to speed on everything that you need to be doing right now to maintain your health. Okay. I was asked to talk about the southbound ICE flights this weekend. So many of you know you can ask me questions over at patreon.com/resistancelive. For as little as $5 a month, you get to ask me questions for 3 hours before every broadcast, and I will answer them on the air or in writing. So over the weekend, as many of you know, there has now been active flight tracking by anonymous accounts on Blue Sky, and these are great people doing incredible work who are tracking flights that have been designated as either being hidden by, like their various information is hidden in the public domain about the origin of these flights and where they're going. But a lot of them are taking off from South Texas and landing in places like Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador. And this is one way that we found out about the flight that was headed to South Sudan last week that then resulted in a finding that the government had essentially broken a court order by deporting 6 people when Judge Brian Murphy in Massachusetts had ordered no more deportations under the AEA. So one of the things that people should be aware of, because there's an important distinction here, okay? The court rulings have not said that no deportations can take place. What they have said in various forms in various courts is that no more deportations can take place under the Alien Enemies Act without adequate due process and significant notice. And that has varied from court to court. But essentially, the government has said like, oh, well, we told them we were going to fly them to South Sudan and nobody said they were scared, so therefore we could do it. No, that's a direct violation of a court order, okay? If, however, you for instance, have an active deportation order from immigration court, right? An immigration court has found that you are undocumented in the country and you have not met the criteria, for instance, for asylum, you can still be deported, okay? So it's not like all deportations have ceased, okay? Now, do I trust this government to be only deporting people who have had adequate due process? Hell no. And I imagine that most of the people in this audience don't either. The real question is, are we going to see initial court actions today or tomorrow concerning those flights and who might have been on them? Because one of the things that we have found is that they have been deporting people who have attorneys who are in active litigation to try to seek citizenship or otherwise to seek legal status without even notifying the attorneys that they're doing that. So nobody knows who's on these planes. And it could be entirely lawful. But do I think that this administration deserves the benefit of the doubt? No, I don't. And again, one of the things that I would encourage people to do is stay attuned to this, because they're trying to carry out a lot of this in secret. And that's one of the reasons why, for instance, some of the usual data that is available for all flights inside the United States or honestly around the world is being hidden. And people who are flight trackers who are really skilled in this are having to make assessments and, are now referring, for instance, to certain Avello flights that we know are being used for deportation as ICE Air. Okay. So stay tuned to it, because we really do need to know what's going on. And frankly, when we have attorneys racing into court saying my client was told he's going to be deported to South Sudan or deported to another location, South Africa, and we see a flight take off headed in that direction, we know that there's been a violation of law. All right. And so all of this is something that, we shouldn't have to be digging for, but at this point we do. But I do want to remind everybody that not every deportation that's taking place right now is in violation of a court order. It's an important distinction. Okay. I was asked, this just feels too early, but I was asked to discuss the 2026 midterms by a Patreon member. So I want to remind everybody that every single member of the House of Representatives is up for election every 2 years, and a third of the Senate in a rotating fashion is up for election every 6 years. Okay. So meaning like every 2 years, a third of the Senate is up for re-election. We have some very significant races coming up in 2026, no question about it. And some of those have already gotten like fairly heated. I will just say to everyone that it's impossible right now to game out how these are going to go beyond the predictions that are usually held and found on the Cook Report. And so if you want to go figure out which districts currently lean blue and which districts currently lean red for the upcoming 2026 election, you should go check out the Cook Report. You can Google it, and it will tell you which races, particularly for the Senate, are ones of serious concern. Now, we also know that there are going to be retirements. Dick Durbin is retiring, for instance, and it's very important that we keep his Illinois seat. So there are definitely races that are going to need to be focused on. But as always, I would recommend that you be deeply informed about the races that are taking place in your state. Okay. And the reason for this is that, nationwide campaigns are not yet underway for key Senate races. All right. There are obviously some exceptions, where, for instance, like we really very much want, a few red senators to be gone. I'm going to remind everybody the margins are very slim here. Like, we do not have to flip that many seats to take back the House. We do not have to flip that many seats to take back the Senate. And we are really going to have to be like balls to the wall, for lack of a better expression, come, let's just say this fall, when we start to get a year out from the midterms. Okay. But for now, my recommendation is that you just get educated about who's up in your state. And if you do have a Senate race that's up, who's running, if anybody has announced yet, who is not an incumbent. And also that you start to think about what your willing involvement is going to be going forward. Okay. Because nobody at this point, there are a few races that people have their eyes on, like obviously Kat Abu, I never pronounce her full last name. I'm sorry, but that's like, what she uses for shorthand. Her race, where the senior Democrat she was running against has already said they're retiring, is a really interesting precursor for what's to come. Okay. But we have an enormous amount of work to do, and that local work is really going to be very significant. So check out the Cook Report if you're curious. Somebody also asked me about Katie Porter's race for governor. I have to say, I have not, since I moved out of California almost a year ago now. There are certain things in California politics, like Gavin Newsom's ridiculous loss of moral ground, that I have paid attention to. But I have not yet gotten very deep into the California gubernatorial race, because I've been very invested in what's happening here in New Jersey. We have a gubernatorial race here this year. And obviously Ross Baraka, who was arrested by the Trump administration, is one of the people who is running for the governor of New Jersey, along with people like Mikey Sherrill, along with Steve Fulop, who is the mayor of Jersey City and has been very progressive and left-leaning and pro-union. So there are various candidates that I'm focused on here where I live. Look, I will just say, as you all know, that I know Katie. Our kids overlapped frequently at school events. Generally speaking, I was very impressed with her when she was my rep, because she was my rep for most of the time that I was in California. She's a formidable candidate. I'm not going to endorse anybody right now. Personally, as far as the race for Senate that she was involved in, I actually voted for Barbara Lee, who is now the mayor of Oakland, who is an incredible candidate and would have made a fantastic senator from California as well. We all know Adam Schiff took that race. But I will just tell you all that I think there's a ways to go on the California governor's race, and we'll see what happens with that. Okay. I do have to mention something very significant with regard to elections, because there was a meme circulating this weekend that was really disturbing. And this is another warning to all of you to please be very, very mindful about the information that you see on the internet. Okay. And again, disinformation functions on the left as much as it does on the right. Okay. And one of the things that the disinformation on the left is often intended to do is divide and terrify, so that people just think the sky is falling when it's not. And I'm not going to suggest that rising fascism doesn't mean the sky is falling, but there are things that are not happening that are being signaled as happening that are designed to scare people into silence. Okay. So this meme claimed that the current budget bill would allow universal wiretapping of American citizens' phones, that it would allow Trump to cancel the elections, that it would allow Trump to overturn elections, and none of that is true. Okay. Now, there are things in the MAGA murder budget, as we have come to refer to it, thank you, Anat Shankar-Osorio, that are deeply upsetting and legitimate. Okay. Like the fact that 13 million people are going to be either kicked off or have their health coverage lowered if they're on Medicaid. Like the fact that SNAP benefits are going to be cut and people are going to starve to death. Like the fact that Medicare is on the chopping block to some extent. Okay. And I'm going to remind you all, this is still a pending bill in front of the Senate. You need to be making your phone calls and advocating, especially for the maintenance of the social safety net in these various forms, so that people don't die. Okay. Really important to make your phone calls on that this week. But no, the budget bill does not allow Trump to cancel elections. No, the budget bill does not allow Trump to overturn elections. That, by the way, would be instantly unconstitutional, and it would be barred in court. Okay. There's nothing in this bill that says that Trump is allowed to overturn elections. Now, one thing, I do want to remind everybody that there are provisions in this bill about things other than the budget. Like it does have a rider that claims, at least at this moment, to allow the general public to buy silencers for guns. Like it does at the moment have a rider that claims that it could stop federal courts from exercising contempt when the government, when Trump and his people violate court orders. Okay. That also, by the way, will be instantly challenged in court. All right. But all that said, I think it is very, very critical to remember when you see something like that, and I'll just tell you all what this meme looked like. It was black with white lettering and a whole list of like dashes down the side of things that were claimed to be in the budget bill. No like sourcing attached to it. No linked articles, right? You see something like that on social media, it should raise the hair on the back of your neck as being not legitimate. Okay. And again, really important right now to not be a part of the problem by recirculating things like that are unverified. Okay. And this is one reason why we're here, because we can talk about this sort of stuff, right? And I can tell you guys what's legit and what isn't. And I do my best to be like 100% accurate all the time. Very occasionally I make a mistake, but we're human. It's really important to not circulate unsourced things that claim that it is even worse than it already is, right? Because again, I have to remind you all that memes are not legitimate sources, that we know that foreign and domestic bad actors will occasionally create Facebook groups, generate memes, pop up in sock puppet accounts, meaning like accounts that are not real people, but that are actually bots, claiming that certain things are true, right? When they're not. And, the real question that we always have to ask ourselves is who benefits if this is true? Okay. Well, if it was true that Trump could cancel elections and that meme is being circulated on the left, what would that do? That would depress voter turnout, right? Because people would think my vote doesn't matter. Trump can cancel the election anyway. What's the point? What's the point of mobilizing for the 2026 midterms? What's the point of telling my neighbors to get out and vote if he can just cancel the election or overturn it? Got it? Please do not circulate memes without checking to make sure that they are true. All right. And frankly, I'll just say one other thing. I'm really tired of meme culture right now, just flat out. In fact, to the point where if somebody responds to a comment that I have made on an article or on a political event, and they just respond with a meme, I will either mute or block them because it's not helpful, right? Things that say like, Trump is the worst president ever, with like a picture of him that has been clearly modified by AI to make him look even larger than he already is, right? That's not helpful. That does nothing, right? So I want to just encourage everyone here to be very mindful of how you're engaging with information and also to only engage in discourse that moves the needle, right? Share legitimate, truthful information that helps to get people out to mobilize in their own communities, to do good work. And, very shortly, when we kind of land in the fall, towards starting to work for the 2026 midterms. All right. But it's really, really key to be asking questions about what's the point of this if you're not sure whether or not it's legitimate. Who benefits? Okay. Really important question. All right. Final thing that I was asked to talk about today was actually a really interesting question. Is the issue of people like Marco Rubio and Lindsey Graham, historically back in 2016, bad-mouthing Donald Trump, saying that he was, a narcissist. There's that famous Lindsey Graham quote that, if we nominate Donald Trump, we'll get destroyed and we'll deserve it. That's certainly true. It's taken longer than we thought, but that's where it's going to end up. One of the things that I was asked about was which version of the men who have done this is the real version of them. Okay. And my answer to that is going to be all of them, because I think that one of the things that has happened in the Trump era is that he has given permission to people who are power hungry and craven to become their worst selves. And that, people like Marco Rubio, who, let's just be really honest about it, has historically been a very far right-wing conservative to begin with, have been empowered to become monsters. And that, by the way, is something that we have talked about when we've talked about the sort of contagion of malignant narcissism and the corruption of power generally, right? So I don't think that, it matters, first of all, whether or not Rubio and Graham have changed their positions, because I think what has happened is that decisions have been made by people either that it was too terrifying to cross Trump, which I frankly think is part of what has happened with Lindsey Graham. Not that I have any empathy whatsoever for that man. Please do not mistake me. All right. But I do think that he has become terrified of, Trump's retribution. And we only have a few instances since that tweet where he's actually said anything against Trump. And one of them was after the insurrection. As for Marco Rubio, I think he's power hungry. He wanted to be president. He ran for president the first time Trump ran. We all know that he was kind of referred to as Little Marco. And I will just mention one other thing here. One of the things that's very common in patterns of narcissistic abuse is that you will modify your personality and your actions to avoid becoming a target of abuse again in the future. And that doesn't make you a good person, right? It doesn't mean that Marco Rubio deserves empathy for engaging in human rights violations and crimes against humanity in terms of these deportations to CCOT and other places that he has actively pursued. But it does explain, for instance, perhaps, why it is that he has spun so completely off of his position in 2016. So, please remember this, all right? And I did a little research about this over the weekend because I was really curious, okay? There's a lot more people in our society who have personality disorders than we might care to admit, right? And one of the estimations that I saw over the weekend was that there is a rough estimate that a quarter of the population of the United States is suffering from some kind of cluster B amalgam of symptoms, meaning like antisocial, sociopathic, malignant narcissist, other forms, psychopathic, other forms of personality disorders that are considered to be particularly malignant, okay? And those folks are very good at covering for themselves, right? Let's just remember people like Ted Bundy, who lots of people found very charming, right? And he was a serial killer, okay? It's quite possible that, one of the things that has happened in Trump's inner circles has been that folks who were already covering these kind of personality disorders have now kind of taken off the gloves because Trump has given them permission to do that. Or their already nascent desire for power has simply been amplified and they've lost all moral ground. So just please understand that I know sometimes one of the things that happens when we're feeling under threat is that we ruminate. First of all, gosh, this is something I do all the time. It's terrible. But, you kind of spin over trying to understand why it's happening. And simultaneously, the intellectualization of it and the understanding of it may give us a little bit of calm, right? Because we're kind of okay, well, that explains that. But it's really important to not stay in that ruminating space and make sure that you're not intellectualizing and then not taking action, right? Because I think one of the things that happens, in fact, I know that one of the things that happens in a trauma response, particularly for those of us with PTSD and those of us who have been victims of narcissistic abuse, is that we are constantly trying to understand why the person is behaving the way that they're behaving. And that actually can stop us from being able to take control and power back in our own lives in ways that allow us to heal and move on. All right. So really, really important to, ask the questions if you're curious about it, but not allow them to bog you down, if that makes sense. All right. Because in some sense, it doesn't matter why they're doing it. There's an argument to be made for this. It matters that they're doing it, right? It matters that people are being black bagged off the street and sent to concentration camps. It matters that the federal government is continuously violating court orders by deporting people to third-party countries. It's not even deportation, it's extraordinary rendition, right? It matters that people who were here at the final stages of seeking citizenship are now being tortured in foreign prisons. That matters, right? The why of it may be an interesting discussion, but not something that should be a bar to actually advocating and organizing and taking action. All right. So Yeah, that's my thoughts about that. Okay, quick programming announcement. There's not going to be a broadcast tomorrow. I have an event related to my kids that falls exactly at lunchtime. So unfortunately, there will not be a broadcast tomorrow, but I will be back on Thursday live. I will be here Friday at regular time. There will be a progressive coffee hour for our Patreon members on Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon. That is our Ask Me Anything bonus broadcast every week. And if you would like to join us, of course, you can become a subscriber at patreon.com. I also have to mention, thank you all so much for all of the great feedback on yesterday's educational video about stealth activism. I will make sure to link it above when we're done here on the live, because the feedback on it has been great. And I'm really glad that it mattered so much to all of you to have an understanding about how you can really make a difference behind the scenes, even if you're not at the front of a protest movement right now. Again, like sometimes I feel like people have a certain sense of guilt about not being at the front of a protest, even if you're older or you're immune compromised, or you simply feel like you're an introvert and your assets are best used elsewhere. No, you matter. And, you know, the best work that we can all do right now is to be in the zone of our best skill set and be using that to move the needle. So please go check out that video if you haven't checked it out yet. And of course, as always, you can download our free guide, which is already linked below in the show notes, on how to make a difference right now without burning out. So please go check that out if you haven't already. Give us a thumbs up, like this broadcast, please. Comment if you're watching it on the replay, and don't forget to subscribe. And I will catch you all back here on Thursday at regular time. And thanks for the understanding about my family commitments as well. I try to be here every day, but sometimes, every once in a while, stuff related to the kids interferes. So lots of love, everybody. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll see you back here real soon. All right, bye.